Tēnā koutou, no mai haere mai. Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. Newsroom, of course, is the place where we talk very intelligently about the news from around the world, local events. A lot of local events, actually, aren't there? Some good ones this time. And overseas as well. We're not restricted by anything here. Welcome to the panel tonight to Carolyn Dean.
Thanks, Bill.
Nice to have you back, Carolyn. Stephen O'Connor.
Hey, Bill.
You're going to be our expert on finance tonight. Of course, as we know, Carolyn's ex-city councillor, so we're going to get Carolyn to talk about some of the latest things going on in the council. First one being, Carolyn, we've had a very small rates increase.
A very, very, very
Is this
small.
sustainable? I mean, are we being realistic here?
Well, I mean, that's the question, Bill. There's so much to balance in terms of running a city. If you think about your own home finances and what's required to run your household and your home, and then multiply that by the 50,000 population, then it's a huge job. And obviously there's really two lines that people run on rates, and it's that you keep rates to a minimum. Times are tough. We want to keep the costs down for the ratepayers, and so it's a good thing. And then there's the other line which says we've got a tsunami of varying costs coming up to do with, there's all sorts of things going on, so just in infrastructure. Our infrastructure's all coming of an age at the same time. We've had a decrease in roading subsidies. There are lots of things that could come up, leaky building wise, earthquake wise, and that sort of thing. So is it better to have a more typical rates increase and to put that money aside for all these other types
Rainy
of
day?
costs for a rainy day? Yeah, exactly. So I think, like a standard rates increase that people would maybe not raise their eyebrows at might be between 3 and 6%.
Right.
Last year was about 1.58%. And to have a 0.43% on the back of a 1.58, it's kind of a compounding question mark then. How are we going?
We're slipping back, Stephen. Do you reckon? Do you reckon we're slipping back and by not keeping up with, say, basically inflation or cost price index, are the council, are they taking too much of a risk and running short?
No, I don't think so. I mean, what's the point in raising rates by more than you need to? I mean, the talk this morning about having a slightly larger increase and perhaps reserving some funds for a rainy day or some events that are coming up. But I don't think that's that you should do that. I think you should know what you're doing, how you're spending your money, and rate accordingly. Carolyn just said that people wouldn't raise their eyebrows at a 3 to 6% rate increase. Well, I certainly would raise my eyebrows at that.
So you do it.
I believe that we should be looking for minimal rate increases year on year, unless there are particular reasons why we have to provide for bigger increases. I note that this small increase comes also on the back of a call in particular by Councillor Arnold for a complete review of council operations. And the cynic in me sort of looks at it and says, well, perhaps if they can recommend a very small rates increase, then the suggestion of a review of council operations might get pushed aside or forgotten about. Because quite frankly, I think the rates increases that the city's had to put up with over the last number of years have been outrageous compared to A, inflation, and B, people's ability to pay. And I think it's about time that the whole council operation was reviewed and that rates were put into perspective.
Do local bodies have a tendency to expand, Carolyn? You just get bigger and bigger, like we know government does. It just expands.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. And part of that, the reason for part of that is because government keep putting more requirements onto local bodies, and so they can't help but expand in certain ways. I think a call for an overall review and an audit is a good thing. It's always got to be a good thing, but you have to also look into the reasons why this rates increase was small, and that they were outside the box sorts of things.
Okay.
So there was a $500,000 a year saving on the electricity contract. So bulk purchasing of electricity, saving 1.5 million over 3 years. So that's one reason. Another reason is Holdco paid an extra 300,000 dividend back to the council.
Where do they get their money from?
Hulk of basically their main money comes from electricity in Invercargill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And they've come up with another 300,000 on top of what they thought their dividend would be.
Okay.
So it's those sorts of things that have gone into this being a very small increase, and which is why I say sort of 3 to 5 or 6% increases, people are kind of used to that. But that's because infrastructure costs, which are the majority costs of council, are so much higher than standard cost of living costs. So it's difficult to keep rates increases at inflation because of that.
In some respects, it seems that the cost of the council may well not have been held at that low rates increase figure because it's being funded from elsewhere, like Holdco. And where else did you say? Holdco and...
the bulk contract price for electricity.
And so that money is actually being spent somewhere else.
Well, I think the question is what happens in the future? Like what happens next time around when we go to renegotiate the electricity contract? Are we in a good position now? Is this where we should have been before?
Yeah.
It's a big question mark, and it's a
whacked
nightmare
back.
for long-term planning.
I said they've cut staff training. Stephen, do you reckon cutting staff training is a good budget measure, honestly?
That's not a significant cost, though. What's the dollars there?
It doesn't say on what I've seen here.
It wasn't. They mentioned that, but I didn't think it was a big number.
Yeah, I'm desperately looking through here for it now, but I can't see it.
But no, it's probably, I mean, staff development's probably not an area that I'd be looking to cut, but unless they felt that...
Especially if you're not going to save a lot on it.
No.
Happy staff, well-trained staff, means good efficiencies. Yeah. Oh, well, at least we're not sitting here griping about the fact that we're all paying more rates.
No, we can always find a way to gripe about, about anything.
Now, I know you were interested in the fact that the council might be going to prevent people having a smoke in the cemetery.
Well, it's something that came up in the recent council news. It's not particularly newsworthy, I don't think. But I did ask, some councillors their opinion, and really nobody seems to be interested in stopping people from having a smoke at the cemetery, and probably that's sort of partly to do with the fact that you can often feel quite emotional. It's an emotional place to be at the cemetery, and so not having a smoke would be, a bit dictatorial, wouldn't it?
I'm not for smoking. I don't like smoking, but it seemed to me to be political correctness gone mad. You're standing in a place where much of the time there wouldn't be anybody within 50 metres of you. You're not there very often. It's out of doors, of course, and the exact reasons that you said.
Yeah,
and
it's not the council, I don't think, that would suggest doing that. It's the Southland District Health Board that make a submission to say, and they have people working on it on a permanent basis.
Right.
Basically, making submission to council all up and down the country to get the sports grounds smoke free and
sports grounds I think is a good idea.
Things.
Yeah, I've actually have witnessed. I mean, when my boys were involved in sports, seeing a coach running up and down the sideline, yelling at the boys and smoking a cigarette. It didn't work. It's not
a good look, is it?
It's not a good look, no. It was a completely dysfunctional situation in some respects. Staying local, the Wild Foods Festival. Stephen, I hear you went. I hear you were there all the time. But, reportedly, I didn't make it myself, but it seems to be a great success.
Well, we think it was, Bill. Clearly, I should declare my interest here. I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Invercargill, which was instrumental in organising the event. And it's been a huge undertaking for our club. We have 70 members. And I think when the now President Mark Bain and a few other individuals set out to embark on this journey about July last year, they probably had 3 key objectives, and the first one was to raise a significant sum of money for the Rape and Abuse Support Centre in Invercargill here, which was the beneficiary of the Wild Food Festival. Secondly, they wanted to create an event that would raise the profile of Rotary in Invercargill, and I think it achieved that as well. Right. And thirdly, the goal was to introduce another community event to the city of Invercargill, which hopefully has some longevity in it, that will continue on and just get bigger and better. And based on our first year, which we felt was a resounding success, and we've already committed to doing it again next year.
Brilliant.
We think that that all three objectives have been met, and that we can make this thing bigger and better.
Really interesting, mate. It sounds like you made quite a good, managed to raise some money. I was going to say make a profit. That's not the right way of putting it, is it? You managed to raise quite a bit of money in first time round.
Yes, well, we were assisted significantly by grants from both Venture and the council, and also we had a lot of community businesses and organisations come on board and support us in a lot of ways, so we're grateful to them. But it looks like we will have the best part of $20,000 to provide to the Rape and Abuse Support Centre for their ongoing activities, and that's on top of what the stall holders were able to glean from the event as well, because there was a lot of community groups that got involved in stall holders, the likes of the Coast Guard.
Right.
They had a stall, and given that their manpower was voluntary and that their product was donated, they, I think, made the best part of $5,000 or $6,000 themselves out of the days towards their current fundraising activities. So there was other community organisations like that were able to benefit, which was another one of the objectives, was to have other community organisations join with us and actually raise funds for themselves as well.
Oh,
so
well done.
it was I think you call it a resounding success.
Excellent.
A lot of learnings, things that we could do better, so that it will continue to improve and get better.
You only find that out though when you run it, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, what the questions on our mind, Stephen, is what wild foods did you partake of?
Well, given that I was busy most of the day and had about 20 minutes for lunch, I didn't really partake in many wild foods. I grabbed some whitebait, which was delicious, and I grabbed a colostrum strawberry smoothie, which again was very tasty.
It's getting there. No spiders, baked spiders or anything like that?
No, there wasn't actually any baked spiders on the menu, but Southlanders are relatively conservative, we found out. So yeah.
So what was the most unconservative food that was there?
Oh well, I mean, there was chicken feet. There was
that's pretty unconservative.
There was kinner shots.
Right.
There was some wild food there, definitely.
Oh, so there'll be quite a few things that people haven't tasted before, because not everybody's eaten kinner.
Oh, absolutely. So, it was great.
Did you go, Carolyn?
I didn't actually end up going because it was finished at about 5, didn't it?
Finished at 5,
and I was busy until about 3 or 4. But my involvement was really from a funding point of view. I was chairing the events committee when the kind of concept of the idea came
from
up.
The council's
council
support.
Yeah, because I missed out on the trip to Hobart. Peter
dear.
Keats got that, so I missed out on all that excitement, which wasn't to do with the food festival anyway.
You got the explaining to go with it. That's how
I dodged that bullet. But anyway, when I was on that committee, we looked at this application and funded it because of the reasons that Stephen said. It's a great community event. It sounded like it had a good chance of working, which you can never tell before these events come around. And I think the best thing was that there were a lot of people who, are sort of well known and running their own businesses, or in pretty significant positions in Invercargill, who ended up volunteering a lot of volunteer hours to coordinate all the.
It's a good look.
The run up. Well, it is, because it's leveraging off their experience and their networking and their ability to leverage other funds and to sort of make something a success. So I actually really liked the idea of this club, and then other Rotary clubs got involved too, didn't they? And sort of being able to leverage funding into that, and then all those volunteer hours from people who, are committed and are determined to make it a success. As opposed to funding something, we get funding applications a lot of the time from outside promoters coming from other parts of the country, and they've got a slick show, but it's not the same community benefit.
People love to turn up and see their local, it could be anybody from their accountant to some storekeeper to their local business person there. Serving them some food.
Well, all of the stall holders were either local businesses or community groups.
Right.
And all of the entertainment was local. And we had Kapahaka group from St Teresa's and various entertainment like that, which again, everything was local, and the product was. We tried to have the product all local as well.
And in the new stadium, Stephen.
And in the new
How
stadium,
did you enjoy that?
it's a magnificent venue. It's an absolutely fantastic asset for the city. Still a few wee teething problems there, but that's to be expected too, with it only being open for a week.
Yeah.
And it'll be better for us next year as well. But no, it's a fantastic venue, very comfortable. Very nice venue or atmosphere for people to sit and enjoy themselves during the day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And somewhere anyone can go. It's accessible. The event was accessible.
Right.
Anyone could enjoy it.
That's right.
So it's a good event to have on the calendar for Southland.
Just one more, really, isn't it?
And not weather dependent.
And yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Didn't matter, one way or the other. Cool. That's our stadium has come to birth again. It's and it's wonderful. Wonderful.
It's almost like being in the old stadium, and certain parts of it that you stand in, you feel like nothing's happened.
Right.
That it was never gone. Oh, you just feel like, it's
Just
this
walk back into it.
stadium's. That was a dream that it that it was gone for a few years.
Yeah.
Bad dream.
I think there's a few tradesmen who tell you it definitely was no dream.
Yeah.
Working day and night on the thing.
Indeed.
I think it was a nightmare for some people.
It was a nightmare.
Absolutely. Speaking of snow, the Sochi Olympics, did you watch them?
No, in fact, I'll be honest. Halfway through, my mum alerted me to the fact that they were on.
Right.
So I.
You're not a winter sports fan.
No,
then.
and maybe that's indicative of
Yeah.
sort of how it went
Yeah.
from a public perspective. I'm not sure. I understand that the closing ceremony was the least. They had the least number of viewers they've ever had for a
Goodness
closing
me.
ceremony. But I had a quick look on the website before I came here today,
Cool.
and one thing I can say is that those winter athletes are good looking.
Right.
Seriously good looking. And why is that?
You're talking about the women or the
Our
men?
team.
Oh, your
Across the
our
board,
team.
they're
Right.
all good looking.
Aren't all athletes good looking?
No, winter athletes, I think, are.
Well,
Not
I
necessarily.
think all Olympic
Maybe it's because
athletes are
they've
pretty
been
good
out
looking.
out in the sun. Yeah, there's not too many who are. Yeah,
Sort of
absolutely.
windsweep.
And our guys did pretty well too. I mean, they obviously we didn't get any medals, but they've shifted up into the levels in the competition. So quite a few in the top 10, and it seems they're very happy to be there.
The sport I love to think about is the one where you ski and then shoot a rifle.
Okay.
Is it biathlon?
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love the idea of that.
Right.
It's just so. They call it the peanut butter and chocolate sport of the Winter Olympics.
I love it.
So
I love
much. It's so fun.
it. Yeah. And that's the thing about the Winter Olympics, isn't it? There's so much variety
Just
there.
different.
You know, there's sports like that and other ones where you take your life in your hands. You know, I mean, even some of them said themselves, looking down on the course on those snowboards and whatnot, it was scary. So when you get top athletes saying that, did you see much of it, Stephen?
We tuned in most nights to have a little bit of a view. I didn't really get absorbed in it, but as I say, we tuned in most nights. It's probably not. It hasn't got as high a profile as obviously as the Summer Olympics has, and particularly in New Zealand. But in other countries, it has huge profile. Of course, like Canada and the countries that are right into the winter sports. I was interested to read that it was the most expensive Olympics ever.
Oh, yes.
Cost $51 billion.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Which is quite a lot of money, and it's
Half our GDP.
well, I mean the
Third.
Chinese, the Beijing Olympics cost $40 billion,
Yeah.
and this is 51.
And that was an actual Olympics.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and you've got to wonder whether it's just a big PR exercise for Russia. Clearly, it was a success from the athletes' perspective. I think the feedback from everybody was that it was fantastic. It was clearly a success from a security point of view because nothing happened.
Right.
Even though there was, as there always is before these major events, talk of the potential for something to happen. And I guess it was a success from Putin's point of view, but it certainly hasn't calmed the people who were critics of him prior and are still criticising him for his backtracking on some of the democracy aspects of Russia and the human rights aspects that are going on in Russia, and particularly their intolerance of the gay community. It certainly hasn't, the success of the Olympics hasn't made those people go away.
No. I've got to say I was addicted to it, parts of it, but I like winter sports, having done my knee in twice skiing. But it's good to watch somebody else doing it. The thing which I was taken with was the bravery of some of those ones, especially, we're not really used to seeing, I've got to say, we're not really used to seeing some of those young women doing things on an equivalent level with the men, you know. They tend to be a bit more daring, but they are fantastic. I mean, incredibly dangerous, some of the things they're taking on with a grin on their face. And the other thing which I noticed particularly was it seemed to be almost comradeship amongst the competitors. It seemed to be more like a case of, well, I'm not perpetually against you and want to win, but rather, okay, we'll see who does the best on the day. But they all seem to be very friendly with one another. I guess it's because they're competing against themselves in the mountain.
Yep.
Frightening speeds, going frightening heights through the air, and some incredible bomb outs. So it's something which you're likely to come away from not injured, as I think one or two did when we saw that. So all credit to them, really. But a very expensive spot to be as far as Russia was concerned.
Absolutely.
And the thing which went through my mind is, what are they going to do with it now? I think Putin's actually hoping that maybe it would encourage tourists to go into the area.
Yeah.
As long as you don't fall into certain criteria, Stephen. You don't say a word against Mr. Putin. Oh, that caution, that note of caution. We'll go to a break. We'll stay with us. We'll see you again very shortly. Welcome back to Newsroom. Starting on a rather sombre note, Carolyn. Charlotte Dawson, tragic death. And we are told, of course, that she had been badly bullied through I suppose, text bullying we'd call it. And in the end, it just got all too much for her. And she's no longer with us. Are we facing something here which we're going to see again? This seems to me to be one of the most terrible tragedies, if in fact that's what caused it, that a person could actually end their life this way, just basically through what other people are saying about them through texting or on Twitter or whatever it is. Social media.
Yeah. Well, I think something about Charlotte Dawson has really inflamed the public, the media. She seems, she left New Zealand to get away from media harassment, which was sort of in the days more before social media was really around. So, that was really squarely sort of levelled at the media. And in the aftermath of her dying, a lot of the comments are squarely levelled at the media. I saw Mike King, the comedian. He does work, I think, up and down the country to do with suicide, and he was levelling all his comments at the media. So so there was that part of it. That's why she left New Zealand. And then in Australia, she's had a lot of success. She's been a judge on Australia's Next Top Model. Gosh. She was on, I think she did a sort of a regular slot on a show like Breakfast, and she was on there the day or two before she was found. And yet, she's had that success in her career and popularity. And then the flip side of that is she's had just a lot of lots of meanness coming from social media as well as the media. And the thing about social media is you really can't, it's so pervasive, you can't get away from it. And if you can't drag yourself away from it, which it doesn't look like she was able to do, because she was on social media all the time, and so she obviously was sort of drawn to it, even though it was maybe harmful to her, so she couldn't sort of put herself aside from it, and it sort of follows you everywhere. So, but she the only thing I ever saw in media reports about her dying was that there weren't suspicious circumstances.
So we're not really told, I guess everybody's sort of
making the assumption, because she'd had a long history of depression, and I guess and she had a suicide attempt in the past.
Terribly sad. It's just terribly sad.
Well, I saw a social media commentator saying that if you're going to get into social media as a celebrity, you need to have the thick skin to be able to deal with with it. And you know, I quite often have seen on YouTube they'll have a snippet of celebrities reading mean tweets. And our local telecasters and newscasters have just done that in the last couple of days, reading tweets about themselves, horrendous, really personal. I want to punch you in the face, Bill Claridge. You know, that sort of thing. You know, if I meet your children, I'm going to push them down in the street. You know, kind of thing. Like such mean things, and people, there's no way to sort of.
Best of luck with my boys.
Yourself. So not good.
You know, when we read these things or hear of them, Stephen, they're not part of everyday life. It becomes a shock, doesn't it? I mean, because you think, well, how could people possibly? Where does this kind of stuff come from that people feel they need to say these things? You know, is it jealousy? What is it? Are they mental? People who say these things, are they mentally ill? What's wrong with them?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I mean, it's terribly sad when someone gets to the position where they feel that the only course of action left to them is to take their own life. And clearly one of the downsides of social media is the fact that I think people feel unreserved when they go on social media. They think there's no consequences.
And perhaps anonymous?
Yeah, slightly anonymous, and they can just say whatever they like, and some people just get out of control and say ridiculously and mean-spirited and harmful things. And for people that are fragile, I mean, clearly Charlotte Dawson suffered from depression, and I don't think we'll ever understand the human mind. It's a fragile instrument, whatever you want to call it, that is clearly can snap. And she just found no other way out than to take her own life, which, as I said, is very sad.
I think that's a good point. There's something about the forum of certain social media that gives people the feeling that they can be as mean as they like. I actually work for an online training program, and we had a group on Facebook. And we've ended up creating another group and another forum, like in our own. We designed our own forum, and people act totally differently in Facebook. It's like when they're in Facebook, they're on their couch with their slippers on and their dressing gown, and they're having a smile, and they're just being complete, you know. They're being really horrible. And when they come to our other forum, it's like they've put on their suit, you know, and they're buttoned up and they're on their best behaviour and they're really nice. And they put up their best photo, and it's it's bizarre. It's bizarre, and it's the same person. And one you wouldn't, you know, you just think, who are you? And this other person's just putting on their best, you know, putting their best foot forward. And it's just two different online environments. So I don't know. I think it's people's standards are sort of. Are kind of dropped to a certain level, and then they just
perhaps they're being revealed in one situation of who they really are.
They're more relaxed, I think.
I mean, it is what's an old biblical saying, was it? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, and maybe that's what's going on. They're really being revealed for who they really are. So, and I guess this will not be the last time that we talk about something like this. You know, it won't be the last time we talk about somebody being really damaged through social media. Because those people will continue to be there, who'll still be willing to do it, no doubt.
Oh, I mean, it'll, you know, this might stop some people, but it'll encourage others.
Yeah.
I think the scariest thing these days is the fact that, I mean, we've only had social media for a relatively few number of years, and so adults have only been exposed to it for that time, but our kids are being exposed to that now as they grow up, and that's where the real risks are.
I totally agree.
I'm too scared to tweet.
Oh yeah.
Too scared.
I can't be bothered. I have a Facebook page which I read every now and again. My wife mainly looks after it, so that's good.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind tweeting, but I'd have to disabled comments.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to say what I think, but I don't want to
that's
know
right.
what
No
you-
feedback.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. I'll say, I like that. Let's talk about some financial stuff now. We've seen this rise in the minimum wage, Stephen. 50 cents an hour. Is it enough? Cunliffe's saying it's not. Council Trade Union's economist Bill Rosenberg said the increase announced yesterday was unfair given several years of stagnating wages, an economy that was starting to grow, and widespread concerns about how that growth would be shared. The first step should be $15.50. The minimum wage is the only way, other than through tax and benefit system, the government has to ensure wage and salary earners, particularly people on low incomes, benefit from a growing economy. So 50 cents an hour that we're seeing there, too much, too little, just right. What do you reckon?
Very hard to comment on that, Bill. I mean, what is too much, what is too little, and what's just right? I mean, to put it into perspective, there's been a rise in the minimum wage every year for the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the minimum wage has increased by $2.25 or 18.75% in the last 6 years, which is an average of 3.1%. So that has more than kept up with inflation over the last 6 years. And given what the global economy and the New Zealand economy as a consequence of that has gone through over that period, I think that that's been more than satisfactory. What you've got to remember that an increase in the minimum wage, it's not the government that has to fork out the money.
That's right.
Well, they have to for their employees, for their state employees, obviously, but it's the private sector that has to find the money to increase the minimum wage. And so you've got to look at what are the consequences of doing so. Will this impact on business so much that A, they have to cut back on staff, or will it push some businesses to the wall? At the current point in time, I don't think that this rise will have either of those impacts, because I think the economy is at a stage now where it's starting to gain some traction, and that it's an opportune time to increase the minimum wage by 50 cents an hour. It may well be this time next year that we can increase it by even more as the economy continues to gather steam. But I think you have to be prudent about these things, and for other opposition parties, other than what's in government, to say that it should be up by more, it's all very well to say that, but if you were in the same shoes, would you be doing it? And I know that Labor has said that they will increase it to $15 within 100 days of being elected, and then increase it again. But again, you have to ask the question, what are the consequences of doing that?
The minimum wage, though, it is has a very good feedback mechanism, doesn't it? I mean, and this has been said particularly in overseas economies where they've increased the minimum wage. It feeds right back into and does stimulate the economy. Whereas we could say, for example, rising dairy prices do not do the same thing, because they go to maybe paying back loans or someone buying a bigger and better car from overseas. Just does not feed back into the economy so much. Whereas your minimum wage, those people on that wage are spending it in the supermarket, the gas station, or buying clothes, so all of it gets spent back into the economy. So surely the more that people get there, the more it's going to stimulate the economy.
Yes, I mean, it will increase consumption, for sure, and it does grow the economy. But the reality is, as Stephen Joyce would say,
yes.
that the increasing dairy prices and increasing returns for our exporters ultimately grows the big pie for the whole of New Zealand, and will ultimately lead to more wealth for all New Zealanders. You don't see the direct links, and you don't see it immediately, but if New Zealand continues to, our terms of trade are at a 40-year high.
So we're performing well at the moment.
Yeah, and so if that was to continue, and exporters would continue to do well, and dairy farmers would do well, ultimately everybody in New Zealand, assuming that there is a mechanism for distributing that, and there is, by reducing taxes and increasing minimum wages, etc., ultimately everyone does well. We can't improve the well-being of all New Zealanders by just increasing the minimum wage. There has to be something else that allows that to happen, and that's the exporters and the businesses and the dairy farmers doing well, and ultimately increasing the wealth of New Zealand.
What do you reckon, Carolyn? Is this enough as far as you're concerned, from your perspective?
Well, I mean, it's a tangled economic web of cause and effect, which I'm
That's
not
a
really
good statement.
qualified. I'm not qualified to really comment on that. But my interest is more in Sockseed well-being, and my interest is more in well-being, the well-being of people. I am not sort of overly motivated to look at 50 cents or 25 cents an hour in terms of that's going to really impact on people's well-being. But I think that if people are educated and are clued up enough to live better on whatever they're earning, then that would be a good outcome from my perspective in terms of well-being. So I mean, for example, there's so much waste goes on in terms of what people are buying at the supermarket. They're taking it home, half of it's rotting, they're throwing it out, they're going back to the supermarket, they're getting more food. They don't understand how to preserve that food, how to keep it for next time, how to, make it into a stew, how to freeze it. Those sorts of simple ideas could be saving them $50, $100 a week, or and that's just in food. There's all kinds of ways that people can live better. And it won't really make that much of a difference whether it's 25 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour that they're getting. So that's really where my interest is.
Okay.
It's more in well-being and the overall sort of doing more with less and being. I think people just need to be clued up on that. They need to be educated as to how to live well.
There's going to be a lot of agreement with that, actually.
There are people there's a lady that's got a website who started off on $100 a week, feeding her family. And getting all her cleaning supplies and everything from the supermarket, basically $100 a week. And now she's challenged herself to get it down to $75 a week. And I think that's a family of 4. I mean, everything she does is homemade and has some incredible ideas. So, I mean, it can be done, and I think we need to put more resources into that than into the argument over 50 cents or whatever it is.
It's true, we have become a society very dependent on going down and buying things at the store, haven't we? And that's changed in a relatively quick time in terms of the history of humanity. I mean, and I'm in a good position to comment on that. So I've come from that era where people did a lot of those things and the skills have been lost.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just talking about it today. As a matter of fact, there's people certainly don't know how to grow their own gardens now, a lot of people around, but there's also a number of people who actually don't know how to cook. So
and then
we're probably at that point where we need to do something about it.
And it doesn't occur to people that they don't necessarily need to drive somewhere, or that they don't need to drive 3 times a day to pop out and pop out. They could just go once every 2 or 3 days, and it would be more efficient, more resource efficient, and et cetera. So that's really where my interest is more.
We'll follow up on this one in future newsrooms and see where we're at.
Okay.
Very interesting. While we're on the finance thing, back to you, Stephen. Genesis Energy. Listen, the government's backing off this thing. Saying, we might not be able to sell 50% now, and we're actually going to tell people how much the shares cost before they buy them. Hallelujah. How much money they might cost you. And they could be selling as low as 30%. They said, should they just eat crow? Eat some humble pie and say, look, it's the wrong time to sell it. We'll leave it till the next session if we get back in government or something like that. Should they back off it? Because realistically, the other energy companies, their share prices haven't done well, have they?
No, they haven't, Bill. Particularly the first one, Mighty River Power, when you look at the investors in that, they paid $2.50 for their shares. And today they're about $2. So that's a 20% drop.
Yes.
On the flip side of that, you can say, well, the government did well. They sold very well because they got $2.50.
Yes,
true. Meridian, which clearly they priced, having seen what happened to Mighty River, they priced the partly paid shares at 110 and they're at 105. So they're still 4 or 5% below where they were issued at, but they were obviously priced slightly better. Genesis will probably be priced even cheaper. Should they sell it? I think, yes, they should still proceed with what they're looking to do, because what they're saying is we're going to test the market. If the demand is still there for this, we will sell up to 49% as per the original plan. If not, we can back off and we'll only sell up to 30%, which I think is a sensible thing to do. They're going to employ the loyalty scheme like they did with Mighty River Power up front, when they haven't actually announced the details of that yet. But if you remember, with Mighty River Power, if you hold them for 2 years,
Yes.
you get 1 additional share for every 25 that you originally purchased at the 2-year point. So they'll probably do something like that. And they are going to price it up front this time, whereas the previous 2 issues, you went in somewhat in the dark as a retail investor as to what you were going to end up paying.
What sort of IPO, though, has to offer? It is an IPO, this isn't it, really, in some respects, initial public offering. What sort of share offer has to have an incentive like that? Listen, we'll bribe you to hang on to these shares. I mean, would a public company seriously do that? If someone had a private company wanted to go public with it, and they thought, well, the share price is going to be so bad, we're going to have to bribe people to keep these shares. Is this a usual thing to do?
Well, certainly no. I mean, an ordinary public or a typical public company would not do that sort of thing. However, it's not uncommon for companies to issue warrants when they do issue new shares, i.e. so for every 10 shares you buy, we'll give you a warrant that allows you to buy extra shares in 2 years' time at a certain price. So it's slightly different than that, but it's a sort of similar sort of thing. What was the second part of the question?
Yeah, go on, sorry.
I've lost it actually.
Oh, it doesn't matter. No, I was just saying about the fact that public companies would they proceed in selling shares? And so really the follow-on thought is, well, why are they selling it? Is it just because they can, and we're the government, we're going to do it to spite everybody? It almost looks like that. Or do we really need the money? I mean, the country's really doing well, and if the company's as good as they say it is, wouldn't it be better to hang on to it and wait till a really good time to get some good dough out of it?
Well, there's a few points there, and the other point I was going to make before was that the incentive only applies to New Zealand citizens or New Zealand shareholders, and it only applies to individuals, not to institutions.
Right.
But should they hang on to it? Well, I actually think that regardless of how you feel about privatisation of state-owned assets, I think they're actually doing a good thing in terms of diversifying out of these assets while still retaining control. Because I think the energy sector, quite frankly, these companies are not going to be worth a hell of a lot more in a few years' time than they are today. The energy sector is not a growth sector, and it won't be. In fact, the demand for electricity is falling in New Zealand.
I agree with you.
And will continue to do so unless we get a significant boost in population. And that's mainly because people are becoming more efficient with their energy use is the main consequence.
Well, and the other thing is we're seeing the advent of the LED light bulb. And it might only be one thing, but my goodness, if those things become cheap, there's going to be a real slump in energy usage for lighting, for cities, for everywhere.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So I think, it makes sense for the government to sell because they're diversifying out of assets which I think have got very little upside in value. And in fact, they've sold Mighty River Power particularly well. And secondly, they're going to raise around $5 billion, which is $5 billion that they don't have to borrow.
They might be able to buy them back cheaper later. Labor's threatening to do it, aren't they? And we've heard the announcement today that the government's going to sell off quite a bit of state housing. So I think it seemed to me, listening to the news clip, that they were basically saying some of these state houses are in the wrong place and they can't fulfil their purpose. So I must say I wasn't too much against it, but I was interested to hear that as long as they replace them with other state houses, because I do believe we need them, I was interested to hear that they own $17 billion worth of them. That's a lot of state houses.
Wow.
Might be just 2 or 3 in Auckland, but $17 billion is an enormous asset in many respects. But I was intrigued with the Deputy Prime Minister's statement, and I'll read it to you, that we don't want to assist vulnerable New Zealanders in a way that traps them in welfare. Something to that effect. And I thought, it sounds like a very benevolent statement when you're selling off state houses. It traps them in welfare. Yes, good old Bill English. Maybe we can talk about that after the break, to which we're going now. Stay with us because we'll be back. Welcome back to Newsroom. Now, we were just talking about state houses before, so we're going to keep on talking about housing. Stephen, we've just been talking in the break about the fact they're going to raise, there's of course this forecast raise of the interest rate, and not too far away, is it really? When's it going to be?
March, next month.
March, next month, okay. So it seems like if you haven't got your mortgage fixed, you should get your mortgage fixed. But my question is this, if they raise the interest rate, the base interest rate, whatever it's called, okay, so doesn't this mean that deposit rates are going to go up? Money's going to pour into the country as people like Americans who can get hardly any interest on their money at all, put their money into our stable economy as they have in the past, thus our dollar rises, therefore our exporters don't get so much for what they're exporting, and everything starts going in this terrible circle again.
Potentially, Bill. I mean, I just about guarantee that the official cash rate will be raised next month.
Yeah.
Probably 0.25%, maybe a half, but I'd say a quarter. What will the impact of that be? Well, short-term interest rates, bank deposits will rise, so people will be slightly better off for those that have got money to invest. Floating mortgage rates will rise, so mortgage holders that have got a floating mortgage will be slightly worse off. I would encourage people to fix their mortgages at this particular time for probably 3 years. And will it have flow-on impacts? Possibly, but maybe not, because this rise is well anticipated. Clearly foreign investors know already that our rates are going to rise. That's probably already reflected in our dollar. So therefore, for a foreign investor to bring their money here, exchange it at the current rate, invest it at our deposit rates, they've still got a significant risk of our dollar dropping further in value, and therefore they lose significant money. Even though they got a higher interest rate than they maybe could get at home, they could end up with a lot less back to them if our dollar drops. And there's been a lot of commentators recently saying that the New Zealand dollar is overvalued and it's going to fall significantly. I don't buy that one either. I don't think the dollar will rise very much from where it is, but I don't see it dropping significantly either, particularly against the US.
Right. What's the driving force? Is it the high house prices in Auckland? I mean, we talked, I think on last time's Newsroom, the average house price in Auckland, it seems, is $700,000 or $800,000. So the government's got to be worried. Would you like to pay that for a house, Carolyn?
No.
No.
Not for the type of house
Right.
that you would get in Auckland.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I wonder, how can people afford to buy a house at that price?
Well, like I say, in Auckland, if you're only getting a 3 or 4 bedroom house and you've got a family to live in it, then you don't really have a lot of options with that. But what I've always found to be useful is to have boarders.
Right.
They pay the mortgage.
Well, there you go.
Doesn't really worry me too much about what happens with the interest rates.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I'm glad I came on the show tonight because I've learned something tonight that the OCR is definitely rising.
She's off the bank
I didn't know
morning.
we had a crystal ball, but I think that it's interesting because if you are in line to get a 50 cent or however many cents, we established that your minimum wage is going up, you're just going to lose it if you're not quick and fix your mortgage.
That's if you've got a mortgage.
So if you've got a mortgage, but then rents go up and any way to cover that if you're renting, and then the whole, I just can't. I can never see the end of all these.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Cycles and things. You can never, and that's the problem that governments and councils face all the time, is that it's this kind of never-ending, infinite,
complex feedback mechanisms. And do you think the housing price in Auckland is a big driver for this? Stephen?
No, definitely.
You don't think it's not?
No, definitely not. No, it's not. The primary reason why the OCR is going to go up next month is because the New Zealand economy is growing at quite a rate now,
Right.
and that there is quite a significant risk of inflation.
What's wrong with inflation? Inflation's done me good in the past.
A little bit of inflation's good, but rampant inflation you don't want. I mean, you don't want to go back to the 80s. Where you were getting 18% inflation, 80% wage rises. That's just a treadmill you don't want to be on. So the primary driver behind this rate rise is the fact that the economy's growing and that there's a risk of inflation. The house price thing they've already tried to dampen that down, and it looks like it's having some effect. through the other mechanisms
Yes.
of,
The restrictions on mortgages.
restrictions on lending. And
So what impact will an increase in the OCR and then floating interest rates have on house prices in Invercargill, do you think, or not on prices but on the market, on whether people are wanting to buy or not?
Well, clearly an increase in mortgage rates makes houses less affordable, but
But do people want to jump on the wagon if they perceive there could be more increases coming up? Is that something like is that a result of?
well, yeah, people could do that. They might say, well, we better buy now and lock in our mortgage rather than wait, but I don't think a 0.25% increase at this stage is going to make much difference to the house.
0.25% doesn't seem a heck of a lot, does it?
No.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just wondering if people see that as the start of more rises.
Which
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they get that, and when they see that to start to happen, then they might start buying again in Invercargill.
Okay.
And more in their droves.
There you
We
go.
will finally see the market, go up again.
It's getting that way. It's getting that way, but not quickly. Yes.
I wouldn't hold my breath on that, Carol.
It's been a while.
Still a good place to get a nice cheap house,
Definitely.
away from the stresses of paying $600 mortgage a week.
Good returns on investment in Invercargill.
There are, actually.
Off the best in the country.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thought. We'll have to pursue that
They
one of these
are,
days. We're going to go to
indeed.
topics of interest now, and starting with you.
Me? Okay, so I am interested and excited about the Relay for Life,
Good.
which is on the 1st of March.
Right.
Big event. It's a global event. I was reading on their website today that they, over the course, I think, of the year, they have 6,000 events around the country, around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Relays for Life. So, I've never been involved before, but I am going to be involved this year. So, one of the things that I've noticed with the Relay for Life is that community spirit of fundraising that a lot of businesses around town get into. So,
Yep.
Preston Russell had a quiz night a few nights ago, which was really good.
Right.
Really good fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, to raise money for that. So it's one of those events. It's not just the event. It's the build up and the community
That's
spirit
right.
that people get into it, and there's it's a really good opportunity
Well, it's all
to
that.
raise money.
It's the publicity is the wrong word. It's the awareness that it generates, isn't it? It's so people are far more aware of the issues, and they can participate, they can make a contribution, and get in and raise money, and it's easier to raise money because of the awareness. So now tell us again, when is it coming? Relay for Life?
1st of March.
1st of March, and whereabouts is the big event?
It's at the
Rugby
Rugby
Park.
Park.
As per usual.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So it should be really good.
Excellent. Stephen.
We've already covered my topic of interest really, Bill, but
Yes.
if I have to throw in another one, I'll say big shout out to those that are, and all the best to those that are doing the Moratapu in 2 weeks' time,
Oh yes.
including me.
Are you doing it? Are you prepared and fit?
I am trained to the minute.
You are. You're at your peak.
Yep.
He's actually going to be riding a bike and then hopping off and then shooting targets.
Are you?
As he go.
No, I'll be riding a bike, and when I get to the end, I'll be jumping off and grabbing a beer.
A beer.
Right.
Because it'll be 5 weeks since I've had one.
Well, my goodness, you certainly are preparing well.
You're looking all the better for it too.
Yeah,
thank you.
You're looking much healthier than
Thank you.
other
So
times.
what do you reckon your prospects are in that?
Well, I mean, it's the first time I've done it. I'm not as young as I used to be, the other side of 50.
More
But
experience though.
I'm
You
hoping
don't look it.
I'm hoping that thank you, Karen. I'm hoping that I can get there in 3 hours.
Cool. How many people are going to be in it?
Oh, thousands.
Just to sort of educate everybody.
Thousands.
Literally thousands.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, tell us where it starts.
Well, the bikers start at Glendew Bay
Okay.
and bike over the hill to Arrowtown, which is
Right.
47 k's, and the runners that do the marathon, they start in Wanaka.
Yep.
And they do 42 k's into Arrowtown. And there's other events like the 15k run, and there's triathlons, and there's all sorts of different events as part of the day, but it's huge. Of course, it's now owned by the Queenstown Trails Trust. The event is
Okay.
owned by the Queenstown Trails Trust, and so they use it as a major fundraiser to help them extend and maintain those fantastic trails that are up there.
Incredible things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, New Zealand has really established itself, haven't we? It started with the coast to coast, and then we've built on that, and we've got events like this occurring all over the country. really throughout the year. And there just seem to be more and more of them. And more people participating, of all ages. There's, there's veteran section, there's all kinds of things. So it's not just restricted to those young, extremely fit athletes, or older, extremely fit athletes. It's something which seems to be expanding. It's good for us internationally as well, isn't it? I mean, it's putting us on the map.
I mean, I looked at the section that I'm in, the 50 to 59-year-olds, and I was amazed at how many people were in that.
Right.
And there's only about there might be 10 or 12 from Invercargill.
Yeah.
They're from all over the country.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 150 people just in that one section alone.
Yeah.
That's huge.
If you could buy shares in it, you'd do better than you would
in
Genesis Energy. On that happy note, we're going to finish. Thank you very much to my panel, Stephen O'Connor and Carolyn Dean tonight, and we'll see you again in a fortnight. Ka kite anō.